A very warm welcome to 2Macs&aDram, brought to you by Liquor City Claremont with Hector Macbeth and myself, Guy McDonald. And of course, we're nearing the end of Women's Month here in South Africa. And so to celebrate the ladies, we've chosen two delicious gins and a wonderful grain whiskey. Hector's going to take us through these. He's going to chew to us and he's going to show us how to make a cocktail. I'm very excited. Hector, thank you, man. This is very, very exciting.
Yes, how's it, Guy? And hello to all the ladies out there. It is your month, so we did decide that we would, for a change, do sort of some elegant, sort of romantic pink drinks, and then add a little bit of just a nice, easy, gentle, slowly sipping single grain whiskey as well. I know, funny enough, my wife will take whiskey over gin every time. She's not, but I think it's more the tonic she's not that keen on. Because when I do the Japanese gin with the whole ginger and that sort of vibe, she seems to quite enjoy that style, but still prefers their whiskey over and above that. Yeah, well, so we're going to look at some interesting, and starting with probably one of South Africa's most sort of successful lady gin makers, which is Simone Musgrave. We featured her before on the show when she launched her brandies, and we did the cocktail when she introduced her swigs as well. So I think it's kind of apt that we give her gin a punt, which is really what put her on the map. She started a few years, about 5 years ago probably, with what she calls the M11. So it's the Musgrave 11 Botanical, typical London dry style gin, which is made by the Hope Distillery in Woodstock for them. So she sort of subcontracted out. And then what she was looking as an addition to make it a little bit more romantic and a little bit more sort of luxurious. So she added rosehip to those botanicals, taking it to a 12th botanical, and then after distillation, she infuses it again with some rose water, and you get this absolutely beautiful pink drink that comes through. And a very interesting sort of stylistically, it reminds me of a very, very typical London dry gin, you know, so it's got that beautiful juniper forward nose, it's got hints of cardamom, but some big flavors. And the addition of the rosehip seems to just exactly do that. It just puts a little bit of luxury around. So if you have to nose the M11 by itself, and you take this, it's sort of like the little luxury, little touches, little soft pink note that just gets added to it. But beautifully, it's just right at the end, you get a bit of that rosehip coming through.
It's a dangerous gin, this though, Hector, because I poured some on the weekend while I was playing Scrabble with my wife, and I literally down the glass. It was just so delicious. I just kept going and going and going, and I lost the Scrabble, which wasn't ideal.
Yeah, apparently gin and words don't share a lot of common time together. You seem to lose your ability to speak if you become somewhat gin soaked. But yeah, so I think for me, it's just one of those gins that it delivers on everything. It's got juniper and cardamom, big notes, and that soft little hint of luxury with the rosehip coming through. And right on the palate, when you finish it well, you get that sort of Turkish delight, which is typical when you're dealing with a rose color.
I love that Turkish delight, and I'm sure that for many ladies, this is the kind of gin that they could really sip on and enjoy glass after glass after glass and not get tired, especially if they've got the right mixer. Hey, I mean, we talk about mixers all the time. And I wanted to ask you very quickly, Hector, would this be something that you would go with just the normal pink tonic, or would you try grapefruit with it?
With this one, actually lamb and what, eh?
So you'd go with a clean original.
The reason I go with this lamb and what specifically, most ladies are also sort of watching the waistline as well, and most of the tonics are quite high in sugar, and I find the sugar replacements they give quite a strange flavor profile to the tonics, and it kind of competes with the botanicals. I don't know why it is, but for me the zero sugar tonics are very competitive with botanicals, and it changes the structure somewhat. So I discovered these lamb and what ones, so they still are sweetened, but they use agave, which is what we make tequila out of. So they're using that. So it's a sweet alternative to sugarcane as such. And it really is beautifully sweet. We use the syrup often when you make a paloma, which is a tequila, lime, and grapefruit mix. So when you put those flavors together, it really, really works, that agave. Because agave is also quite an upper. So it kind of balances out, because alcohol can be quite a downer. So putting this up gives you an upper without that big sort of sugar hangover the next day kind of thing. So it's a hell of a good alternative, and they come in various flavors as well. The plain one for me elevates this gin to just sort of make it a little bit better. But let's actually put that in a glass. We're not going to be making cocktails. We're just going to do a simple serve. So a bit of ice in here.
And I like the fact that the spring water that's included in this comes from the Lake District, which I'm presuming is obviously the UK Lake District and not the Lake District in wilderness up the garden route.
No,
because beautiful part of the world that.
Absolutely, and they really, they, like I said, they come in 4 flavors. I think you get basil infused, cucumber. Then the other one is what's that pink flower? Hibiscus. They've got a hibiscus one, and then the plain one. So all 4 of them are, for me, are very good. So just put your Musgrave in there. It doesn't require any further garnishing other than that ice, and then pour it in over there. And for me, what this one does is it just gives you that lovely flavor. So you suddenly get that little pearl white character coming through, but it just opens up the nose beautifully. When you go back in there, that rosy Turkish delight just sings big time. So
this is the rose garden that's missing from the White House. You've seen Melania has pulled out all the roses from the White House. Apparently there were roses that were planted in there back in 1913 by previous presidents' wives, and now the whole area just looks like the entrance to a Sheraton hotel, apparently. But this is where the roses are.
Or Trump Towers, maybe, not Sheraton.
True.
Absolutely, and it's amazing how it opens up that nose beautifully. And then when you taste it again, it sort of just highlights all those little different flavors along the side without that big sort of, tonic's always got that big quinine bitter note in it. The agave just flattens it out. It highlights all the flavors and brings it out beautifully. So if you see the lemon white range, really try them. They are absolutely beautiful. They're not like your typical tonic, which is quinine driven. It's much more subtle notes. It's very much sort of a little bit more elegant. So I think you've got the elegance of the rose pink gin and the elegance of it, and together, wow.
It's a fantastic suggestion from Hector, because as you've mentioned there as well, that quinine can sometimes be the off-putting factor after maybe 2 or 3 gins. People say, oh, I need a rest now. And exactly as he's saying, there is absolutely no bitter taste. You get that beautiful flavor of the gin and then that soft, elegant finish. So this is a wonderful suggestion. Thank you.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing with the lemon white, the bubble reminds me more of a soft champagne as well. The mousse is much softer than in your typical South African tonic waters you get. They're quite carbon forward, where you get this big sort of like real rush of the gas coming through. The bubbles are big and hard, whereas this one's got really soft, sort of gentle bubbles as well, I find. So that's also why I quite enjoy them. This one and the hibiscus, both of them work as well. The hibiscus adds another level of floral note to that pink gin, so it can be a little bit competitive, but I think in a good way. But yeah, doesn't even need a garnish. If I was to garnish, I would probably go with grapefruit, with just a wedge of grapefruit in this one personally. That just gives you that sort of bitter note that's missing from the quinine. Comes that grapefruit note, and so you get a little bit more balance on that side. Because this can seem slightly sweet, although it's not too sweet, I don't think, but it can seem a little bit sweet than what it should be. But I think it's pretty close.
And I guess when it comes to serving as well, just from an aesthetic point of view, it's nice to have a bit of garnish in the glass so that your guests know that you've made an effort and you're not just there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes if you also just look at it, you'll see the elegance is there, because it's got that funny sort of mother of pearl sort of shimmer with the pink and that mixing up. So it does sometimes, for me, basic is much better than over garnished as well.
Wow.
So that's the first gin. Then we're going to go look at the Firkin Rosie Gin, which is it got gold medal at 2018 gin awards in the UK. This is a Scottish gin. The guys at Firkin were quite an interesting bunch. So they're whiskey guys first and foremost, but they started to make regional gin. So they do a Glasgow gin and they do Lee out of Edinburgh gin. And then they started to do the Firkins. Now, Firkin is a 30-litre barrel that you age wines and whiskies and so on in. So they bought a whole, obviously their mainline business is whiskey. So they had a whole lot of Firkins. So they took their quadruple distilled gin and they put it into different whiskey barrels, and they won Best Gin for 2018 Gin Awards with an Isla finish. So they took a heavily peated whiskey barrel, finished the gin in it, and then bottled that. So they sort of came up with a term ginski, where their gins all sort of tasted a lot more like whiskey because they were finishing them in different woods. And we're hoping sort of early next year to have the full range, because they've extended it to 5 different barrels now. So they've got a bourbon barrel, they've got an Isla cask, then they've got some French oak casks, and they've got some red wine casks. So they've done all these different finishes, which was doing really well for them. So they got quite a bit of name behind them. Then the Rosie was just a bit of fun again. So what they've added, they've added strawberry, rosehip, and then obviously a little bit of almond, just to give it that sort of nutty character that you pick up as well. So, this one is quite a, you're kind of expecting after the first one, it's not as pronounced, the rosehip, it's there, but it's got this sort of toffee lacquer note that comes through, and that's the almond note that just sort of sits over and above it. And inside there, they've actually taken strawberry oil and they've put that in there as well. So the color, that differs from batch to batch. This one is very, very light pink, but it's 100% natural color. They don't add anything to give you the color. So what's there is natural extraction from the rosehip, which again is distilled early on. Quadruple distillation just gives that extra level. And yeah, this is. I was going to ask,
why the quadruple? Yeah.
So we're looking at a grain, so we're starting off to the same basis what we would make whiskey out of, and distilling that 4 times, so that you'll feel the minute you use grain spirit, you get this warmth of character that's just beautiful over there. And that quadruple distillation just makes it so much more approachable and sort of lighter in style. Then with the botanicals coming through. So it's not a typical juniper forward nose at all. It's quite a very soft, gentle nose with slight hints of strawberry and slight hints of rose, but nothing overpowers at all. And then like a sort of coffee sweet that all binds it together. But on the palate,
I was just going to say on the nose, what's interesting is that obviously the suggestion on the bottle is of rose. But when I first nosed it, I didn't get the rose petals. I got the strawberry, and I was, maybe there's something wrong with me. But when you read the back label, you're not. It's correct.
Absolutely. But then the interesting thing is when you put that in, now compared to the one before, so you get the big rush, it hits you huge with the rose hip, and then that sort of turns into this big, warm, real lush sort of spirit. It's very sort of thick and rich in character, and then the juniper kicks in a big way, and then that sweetness from the almond comes through, and it finishes in strawberry. It's just the most amazing thing how it changes to a strawberry parfait almost right in the finish.
It's like three very zesty waves of flavor that identify themselves in a particular order. It's incredible.
But for me specifically, what makes a grain base, if you're using grain spirits as your base, is immediately you get that thickness and that warmth, and that richness that you don't get in if you're using cane spirit, or if you're using one of the other base spirits. You don't quite get that richness. I think the only other place I've seen it is then the Japanese use rice as their base spirit. That gives you that same sort of thickness and warmth and feeling that you get. But I think that's what makes this gin, obviously why it was a gold medal winner, was that real warmth and character. And it's like you say, it's wave after wave of different flavors with a long finish, a hell of a lot going on there. They're complex, but still approachable.
But, and certainly very unique from the point of view that I can't really remember the last time that I sipped a gin that I could be quite happy sipping neat. Yeah. Because of those waves of flavor, it really does offer, and that intensity and the zest and the body. It's sort of it's like a white version of a whiskey, if you will, and it's something that you could, if you really, I mean, I don't know how much the bottle is, but if you paid a hell of a lot for it, you didn't want to mix it with anything, you could get away with drinking it neat.
No, absolutely. It's about 400 Rand a bottle, and it's a 500 ml bottle, so it is a little bit pricier. So it would be like a 600 Rand bottle of gin. So it is sort of at the top end of what gin costs. But the wood finishes, especially when they come to South Africa, when we get them here landed next year, we're definitely going to do a tasting with them, because they really, the term Ginski is spot on. You know, it's
Love
really,
it. Yeah.
it sort of appeals to your gin, but that it'll also appeal to the whiskey palate as such. So we're going to also put that in the mix. Let me just grab some more ice there.
Got everything close by, thanks to Hector.
So into that, I've cut up some strawberries, just some strawberry pieces, which you just throw on top of the ice. And then into that, you throw your gin.
All right.
Give that a little bit of a stir. I can find my
Strawberry.
okay. Just a little stir of that. And you can sort of just gently press the strawberries, just so that they release a little bit more. And then the interesting part, people often look at me a bit weird, black pepper. Grab yourself some black pepper and scrunch that all over the top, just 2 or 3 good grinds, and then stir that in as well.
Wow. That changes the appearance quite remarkably.
The minute you put that, exactly, that's what it should look like. And then go back and nose it now. And the first thing that hits you is suddenly citrus fruit, which is so weird because everything's been about roses and strawberries, but the adding of that pepper, you suddenly, the strawberries there, but there's this big hit of citrus over the top. And to that we can add the pink tonic. We just want to encourage that strawberry flavor to come through. And yeah, I'm 50-50. The grapefruit one and I are becoming best of mates. I'm just absolutely loving that. Although I prefer to put that sort of with the Paloma, which is tequila based, which is also citrus forward. So you can go either or. Yeah, I'm going to go the pink just for now because it's Women's Month. If it was Men's Month, I'd go for the grapefruit. But try both. The interesting thing here is the actual pepper and the enhancement the pepper gives to the drink is quite incredible, actually. So there we go. We've got a beautiful Women's Celebration pink.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Nice pieces inside of it and everything. So there we go. Slanjava.
Slanjava. And as my friends would say, buffalo, because I used the wrong hand.
They don't pick it up on the screen because it's backwards anyway. That's why you never get caught for buffalo. But it's amazing how it
makes it quite savory, Hector. It makes it quite savory, the addition of that pepper, hey?
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's, you know, you often see strawberry and balsamic together and people not so sure if it works, but it absolutely does work. Strawberry loves pepper, it loves balsamic vinegar, all those sort of notes come through. But for me, the interesting part is that if you were to age the spirit in wood, we'd get those whiskey notes, but adding the pepper obviously gives us those same sort of woody character coming through. So it's sort of, as it were, it's kind of like a cheap alternative to wood, you know. So it gives you that woody note coming through as well inside there, which I quite enjoy that, I must say.
I must remember that. If I want to wood something up, I'll just grind some black pepper into it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it works with everything, but it definitely works here because it's all about balance. So we've got a good citrus note here, we've got a good sweet note, we've got a natural fruit note, and now we've got a natural sort of wood and spice tone coming through as well. So all those flavors are working, which is what gin's all about. Gin is all about picking those different botanicals and those different flavor profiles. So I think this drink sort of gets that right. Like I said, if you want to go savory, then that grapefruit tonic works really, really well there too.
Can I ask you a question on behalf of many others when it comes to gin overall? And I picked this up from a variety of friends who sometimes feel a little bit intimidated by the different types of mixes that you can get, and they're not sure what works and what doesn't work, and so they stick to the ordinary Indian tonic and they don't experiment. What advice do you have for people that are a little bit intimidated and they go, well, I've paid $400 for this beautiful gin. Now, what do I put with it? And I don't want to do. Can you can you make the gin worse depending on what you put in it, or is it a playground for testing?
Yeah, I think the key with gin, and I'm glad, I think the reason it's been successful in the last bit is because the tonic guys have gone to war and said, listen, don't be lazy, you know, try different things, try different things. So I think that's what's also driving the gin boom as well, is the guys that are creating tinctures and tonics on the sideline. And basically the rule of thumb with gin is don't be lazy, because that's all you are being when you stick a piece of lemon in normal Indian tonic water. That's just lazy. You know, really experiment with it. And so what I encourage the guys to do is like you always see on my bar, I've got cardamom, I've got juniper berries, there's cinnamon quills. They're all sitting over here for a very reason. If you're going to come and drink gin, basil, rosemary, put all those flavors together, black pepper, put them all in little bowls, and then all your different citrus fruits. These are all the botanicals that are in here anyway. So now you're just going to enhance those. So if your gin is cardamom forward, you're obviously not going to add cardamom. But if you've got a gin that's a little bit softer and you like the cardamom, add it, you know. And those are the sort of things. Coriander, which is a very common South African flavor. We use it in biltong a lot. We love coriander, but you don't see us, I'm talking about the seeds now, not the green coriander. We don't often use them other than to make biltong. But crush them and throw them in your gin like I did with the pepper now, and you'll see that familiar flavor comes back. So my suggestion to anybody, to get back to your original question, is buy the cheapest gin you can, okay? Buy 3 different tonic waters and 8 different botanicals that you're going to add, flavors that you like. Cinnamon, nutmeg, cucumber, rosemary, all those flavors, and experiment where you tend to go. Are you going sweeter or savory? Then next time you buy a more expensive gin, see is it a sweeter or savory gin, and then complement it with those.
Fantastic. So, good advice. Thank you, Hector. Yeah.
But that's what it is. It is about a little bit of experimentation, and you'll be amazed what a bit of nutmeg and a bit of cinnamon can do to a gin as well. Even just your sort of plain stock standard bottom shelf gin, when you add it with a nice, interesting, like if you were to use that lemon white hibiscus and throw in that nutty note and the nutmeg and a bit of cinnamon, you'll be amazed how that gin will sing beautifully. The base spirits are all pretty much taken care of the same way. Forget about price now. So what you're adding up over there can be enhanced by adding more to it. So that's all you're going to do is create those different flavors that you want to do there.
I'm terribly excited. I can't wait to be able to have somebody over for a braai and offer them this particular gin cocktail with the ground pepper, because I know they're going to look at it like this and go, what? what is this?
Absolutely. But even though it's set a little bit now, when you go back to it, the flavors have come together a bit more.
It's got a bit more pot puree that comes through on the palate, less savory for me now, and more of that kind of Malay curry almost, those flavors.
It's got that almond note kicking through now all of a sudden, where it wasn't that present for us. It reminds me of that pink, what's that stuff called? Candy floss, that sort of pink candy floss. Now that it's had a bit of time to mangle there, it's coming through a little bit more.
And it actually, for me, I don't know if you've been to that little spice shop in the Bull Carp, but when you walk in, the aromas that hit, the aroma that hits you first, that's what I'm picking up now on the palate. So.
Absolutely, and it's the most amazing thing, and those exact spices that they're using to make those boboties and stuff there in the Bull Carp, that's exactly what you want to put into your gins as well. All those flavors, you know, I mean, curry leaf, geez, it's such a wonderful thing in alcohol, you know, people never think of putting it in alcohol, and you just need one leaf, you just fresh curry leaf, and you push it on the top, and it just goes those beautiful flavors. I know there's a guy in Belito making Gin Sala, the brand, and it was a childhood memory of going to the beach and getting the curried pineapple on a stick. And that's what exactly how he inspired him to make his gin and that sort of stuff. So think of your childhood flavors that base rang true to you from a spice and that point of view, and add those to your gins, and they bring a little bit of your youth back to you, and they give you a little bit of flavor profiling that's familiar to you. And you'll see how much more you enjoy gin, other than sticking to what they've sort of put together.
Love it.
All right, the last one we're going to do today is the Loch Lomond Single Grain Scotch Whisky. We have featured Loch Lomond on before, and if you remember, they're the weird scientists that keep the Scotch Whisky Association on their toes, because they say this is how you make whiskey, and then they push every boundary they possibly can. So this is one of those products. It says they're single grain whiskey made from the finest malted barley, and as any sort of basic whiskey course will teach you, malted barley is single malt whiskey. So why is it called single grain in this instance? And it's because of the still. So typically malted barley is put into pot stills, and we distill it once, distill it twice, and sometimes 3 times through the pot still process, and that gets bottled and labeled single malt whiskey. They've decided to push this through a continuous still. Okay. So take 100% malted barley and pushed it through a continuous still. So that's how we make grain whiskey, normally with the other cereals other than barley. So they've obviously changed that up a little bit. The Japanese do it as well. Nika does their coffee malt. That is also 100% malted barley through a continuous still. So technically, the Scottish Whisky Association won't allow them to call this a single malt, but it is a single malt whiskey. It's one single distillery made with 100% barley. So it is actually a single malt, but through continuous still, not a pot still. That's the only difference. So they have to call it single grain. But wow, what a different sort of style. And it's interesting, both this and the Nika, both of them give you that same initial nose where you go, wow, that's like a real elegant sort of barley note coming through. It's barley, but it's not barley. It's sort of...
It's not farm grade barley. It's the posh version.
No, exactly. It's got this sort of elegant toffee sort of nose, you know.
Yes.
You go in there, it sort of gives you this lovely sort of bouquet of flavor as opposed to just sort of a malty, that cereal note. It gives you much more sort of toffee nuances going into vanilla character. But
and a soft
barley, yeah.
A soft scent of kind of licorice all sorts?
Yeah.
Not licorice all sorts.
Yes. So it's giving you those little different sort of soft flavors. It's got a bit of marshmallows and all those sort of notes coming on. But at the same time, it's distinctively barley. But if you were to be able to remove the maltabella sort of cereal note out of barley, what's left behind, that's kind of what it does. So it's quite efficient of stripping that sort of malty character. So when the wind's blowing from the northern direction and the breweries are going, you get that maltabella note that comes through. It removes that through the continuous distillation. But at the same time, it's that familiar barley note, you know it's familiar, but it's a little bit more elegant. So very interesting. I think it's predominantly American white oak, so that's where you're getting the vanilla and toffee note from as well. And quite an easy drinker as well, everyday sort of drinking whiskey.
Lovely and smooth, but also relatively sweet as well. So I think fans of sweeter whiskey will definitely be encouraged by this.
Yeah, so obviously this is aimed at the Baines drinker. You know, the guy who's drinking single grain whiskey through continuous distillation. They're obviously using corn to make Baines, whereas we're using barley over here. So it appeals to the same palate that a grain whiskey drinker is. So if you're a Baines drinker, what you like about the elegance and palate, that you'll find here. But there's a slight flavor differentiation because you're moving from corn, which is very sweet, to barley, which is also sweet, but in a different way. So it's interesting how the two sort of flavors go up against each other.
Can I ask you?
I really enjoy both.
Can I ask you for a comparison with the Tamavulan that we did last week? I actually got some feedback from our winner from last week, who said that on social media that really enjoyed the whiskey, and it was a sweeter whiskey, that he enjoys sweet whiskey, so he thinks this is going to be his new favorite. A comparison between that we tasted in this?
Yeah, so this is in that sort of same sort of flavor profile when it's quite sort of sweet. We're missing the dark fruits from the sherry cask here because we don't have sherry wood involved in the maturation section. Whereas Tamavulan had double casking, so we had the American oak and the sherry cask. So that gives us a wider sort of berth of flavor. Whereas over here, we're getting a more elegant style because of the distillation process, and just the American oak comes through, obviously. So we don't have those richer, dark fruits coming. But this is the same palate, though. It's an everyday drinker for a guy who likes to drink Baines whiskey, the guy who likes to drink sort of lowland-style scotches and sort of younger Speyside styles of whiskies. All of those guys will fall into this flavour profile.
I'm interested to see what my wife thinks of this and what she thinks of it just with a bit of ice, rather than actually trying to make up a cocktail for her, because as we've spoken before on 2Macs, oftentimes a great introduction into whiskey for ladies is to make a cocktail. So if you were to go that road, what would you suggest mixing with this?
This for me is, there's a cocktail that I saw a few months ago where a guy makes a pear syrup. So simple syrup is sort of equal parts of sugar and water. That's a simple syrup. And in that he boils up pear, actual pear fruit. And then you serve that with dry pear as a syrup. So that's what you sweeten it up with. And then, so you can have it just sort of as an old fashioned, with just a sort of hint of, so you just stir the syrup into it with lots and lots of ice, and then just a hint of bitters. And I would go sort of in burlesque style bitters, where you got that real richness. The burlesque style is quite hard to explain to people, but it's kind of like a meaty note that comes through on it. But at the same time, it's quite subtle cocoa and chocolate notes coming through as well. So just a couple of drops of that to sort of balance off on the sweetness. And stirred in like that, and wow, that'll sing big time. You can top that with soda as you like. You could also go ginger ale there, because they'll just bring in a bit of the spicy content coming up as well. But just the pear syrup so basically 1 shot of pear syrup with 2 shots of whiskey stirred on lots of ice and a hint of bitters, and then the dry pear inside that. I think that'll work really, really well. But you know, if you wanted to keep simplified, ginger beer, ginger ale with this. And then just something to sort of add a little bit of the bitters so that it doesn't get too sweet. Even if you just got a mango stir on the top, that'll work fine.
Thank you for that suggestion as well. I've added a bit of water, because obviously when we've been doing this before in person, we've always done the neat test and then the water addition test, and the nose changes somewhat, Hector. I mean, I've kind of lost that sweet floral note.
So the minute you take the water, well, what I get, it becomes quite sort of effervescent immediately. You get sort of a sherbety note coming through, but the sweetness goes away 100%, and it sort of reminds me a little bit more of green barley. All the green barley notes come through with the addition of water, and then. Why I suggested the pear, for me, I get fresh cut pear on the nose and going in towards boiled sweets that are sort of pear. It doesn't quite get to apple. It hints at that it's going that way, but it sort of stops at pear. It doesn't quite go all the way to apple. It's not that fresh.
You're spot on. And I get that boiled sweets, and you're so right. You go, is it apple? No, it's not. It's almost there.
Yeah, it's sort of going that way, and then you know it's pear because of that. And then the interesting thing with the water is that sweetness is completely taken away, but you get a fresh summer drink. It's amazing. It's just like shoots into it almost goes the sort of palate we found with the gins, you know, where the juniper notes and all those notes came through, the cardamom and that. It sort of clears it up, becomes quite a bright spirit as opposed to that thick, warmer, sweeter spirit. Sort of brightens it up a little bit. So this would be one of those typical ways that Japanese drink it with lots of water. So 2 shots of whiskey, block of ice, and then like 5 parts water, and they stir it. They call it the Mizuwari, which means angry water. So I think it'll work really, really well there as well, just as that.
You're right. It completely softens it out, which is not a bad thing, especially if you're not a big fan of terribly intense whiskies. And I mean, I wouldn't add as much water as the Japanese do, but it certainly is delicious with the addition. I've added some water that comes out of a bottle, if I can show you, that's made from sugarcane. this whole bottle and the lid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I did it on purpose because I wanted to see if it would sweeten up the whiskey. But there's no sugar leached into this water.
No, it should have no impact on it. But it's interesting though, because I think it's almost seasonally correct. The neat, we're right in the middle of autumn, or towards the latter end of autumn as we currently are, and then adding the water sort of is spring. You know, it sort of takes us into spring, so it changes the season somewhat. So if you're sort of sitting out on the beach like I was last weekend on the west coast, this and Baines are absolutely ideal as that sun goes down, you know, sitting there. But in a month from now, you just add the water, and then it's a lot more summery sort of spring note coming through. So yeah, very, very cool mix. Yeah.
Delicious. And so I believe you've got quite an awesome prize lined up for this week, eh?
Yeah, so it's 1 bottle of Loch Lomond Single Grain Whisky and 1 bottle of Musgrave Pink Gin. So a very good prize to win there as well. And we're actually doing, through, if people want to buy some of the Loch Lomond, we've actually got that on special this week as well. That's also why I included it, for only $2.99. It normally retails about $3.70, $3.80. So for $2.99 for the next couple of weeks, if anyone wants to buy some, they can just drop us a message on our Facebook as well. And then the Musgrave, we featured that last week as well on the Friday double deal at $3.85, which was like a really, really good price. Whereas also normally about $4.50, $4.60.
$4.89 when I bought it for my wife. So yeah, it is a good price.
So they either win it, but they're on special at the moment as well. Tony's also got it at Liquor City Claremont at $2.99 at the moment, Loch Lomond, while stocks last. I'm not sure what his Musgrave price is at the moment. I'll have to double check that. But yeah, pretty good deals going there at the moment.
Absolutely sensational. And of course, this has been another wonderful occasion for us to learn about gin and whiskey. And for ladies, Women's Month as it is, we need to celebrate each other. We need to celebrate our palates. And I think it's most important that if you are a lady that's overhearing this as your husband watches this, get involved. Ask him. Say, hey, what was that? Go buy me a bottle. Or I'll buy myself a bottle. And really experiment, because there's no reason why we shouldn't all be enjoying and appreciating these spirits across the board with our own intentions and our own creativity.
Absolutely. And just because it is Women's Month, I'm going to throw, and this is for women only that enter the competition, they can win a bottle of Rosie. But that's women only. So anyone can win the Musgrave and the Loch Lomond. But for women only this month, we'll give a bottle of Rosie as well to the ladies that enter. We'll randomly draw that. Obviously, there'll be a question for the other two, and then we'll randomly draw any females that have entered. We'll go into the hat and we'll give a bottle of Rosie away to them as well.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. I'm going to pick up the peppered one to toast you with, because
yeah,
fascinated by this.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I think, Hector, anything else from your side?
No, that's it.
So until we see you again next week, we say Slang Javar.